Our question for this morning is, should a Christian use AI? One person who commented on a post I made this week said, coffee time is going to be real spicy after church on Sunday. And I anticipate exactly that. I hope this morning that I will at least make you think. I hope to challenge you, I hope to stretch you, and even if you don't agree with me today, I hope this morning that you find yourself closer to Jesus and more clearly understanding the technology in your hands and all around you today. And so we're going to dive deep into this question, should a Christian use artificial intelligence? And if you hope that I will answer it entirely this morning, you will be gravely disappointed. Because it is going to take me 4 weeks to answer this properly and to piggyback on the larger use of technology in our culture. But I want to begin to ask and begin to encourage you to think about this. Should you use ChatGPT? Should you download it on your phone? Should you use Gemini and Claude and all of the other options that you have at your disposal in this thing called artificial intelligence? And the core question that we're going to dig through in this series, in part, is simply this. Are these tools helpful or dangerous? Or both? See, that's the core of this matter. Is it helpful? Is it dangerous? Or is it possible that it's both? And I think by the end of the series, you'll have an answer to that question. And I realize when I preach on something like this, on a morning like this, in this room, there will be at least 3 types of people. Some of you in this room have taken to this technology the moment it was created, and you have used it indiscriminately. As soon as you could download it, you did, and you have tried everything you can think of on it. Some of you in this room are terrified. Anybody terrified? And you have kept as much distance as you possibly can between you and AI, and you feel a little guilty even considering the idea of using it. And probably the largest group in this room are those of you who don't realize it but are using a form of artificial intelligence every single day. It's everywhere. It's around you. It's beneath the things that you think don't include it. And this is why we need to talk about this. And I pitched this idea to my wife 10 months ago, and she says, nobody's going to care. And 10 months ago, I don't think any of you did care. But I bet you do now. And I hope you do. And if you've never thought about it, it is time to start. Because we are at the beginning of what many are calling the greatest technological revolution in the history of humankind. Greater than the Industrial Revolution, greater than the invention of the electricity and the electric motor, greater than all of these things, some say even combined, future and time will tell. The question that we are going to ask is this: should Christians use AI? And part of the reason why I want to preach to you this morning is because I didn't preach to you in 2007. And I regret it. In 2007, the iPhone began to sell rapidly. The iPhone 3 proliferated its way into our world, and it was just beginning. How many of you remember 2007? There was a world in which everything wasn't mediated between the smartphone in our hands and the people in front of us, and it began roughly about that moment. And many of us as pastors, we didn't say anything because we didn't know we needed to. Many authors didn't write anything because we didn't know what we were writing about. And I think it's time that we ask the right questions and think through these technologies before they become a part of the fabric of our families and our societies. Amen? Maybe we should critically ask the right questions before we become addicted to or enmeshed in, and ask the question, does God want to, should Christians use artificial intelligence? We're going to branch out into tech in general, but we are going to start with that idea because it's the most pressing question in our world today. I remember the moment, I don't know if you do, but I remember the moment I realized that artificial intelligence was everywhere and I wasn't aware of it. We were traveling on vacation and we had walked by this gorgeous restaurant and we knew in 2 hours we needed to eat dinner. And so we went back to our Airbnb. I called up the restaurant and I just said, hey, can I reserve a table for tonight? And the restaurant employee said, absolutely. What time would you like to come? And I said, how does 6 o'clock sound? And he said, perfect. How many should I reserve for? Well, I said, 2 people. And then he said, wonderful. We can't wait to see you guys. We'll see you at 6. And I said, hold on just 1 second. Do you have any gluten-free items on your menu? I'm a bit of a dietary diva. And he said, after a long pause, we have a great menu. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And then I said, oh, that's great. I bet you do. But do you have any gluten-free options on the menu? Because I can't eat gluten, and I want to know if I can eat there. And then there was another long pause, and he said, we have a great menu. We can't wait to see you. And then I tried like an idiot one more time, and I'm like, I get it, but I can't eat gluten, and you're a pizza restaurant. Do you have gluten-free options? And what did he say? We have a great menu. We can't wait to see you. Only then did it click that I was talking to a machine. It was so convincing. It was so lifelike. The rhythm was real. This was a year ago, and I couldn't tell till I was 3/4 into the conversation. And many of you may not realize that right now, so much of your life is already infiltrated and influenced by artificial intelligence. The algorithm that feeds your social media feed has been using AI for 5 to 10 years. When you talk to bots on Amazon, half the time you're talking to a machine. There are whole portions of our lives that are dominated already. When you use Google Maps, often it is using an artificial intelligence algorithm to shape your direction and tell you where to go. In the recent war with Iran, did you know that many of the places they bombed because they figured out where the stuff was with artificial intelligence? So much of your everyday life is already involved with this technology. And so we're going to ask that question, but in order to go forward, we're going to have to go back. And so are you ready to learn this morning? Okay, 6 of you. That's better than normal. Normally it's about 4. In order for me to properly answer this question, we have to go a little further back before we go forward, because I want to do it justice. I don't want to give you flippant and glib answers. I want to try and genuinely ask and answer the question, should we and how should we use artificial intelligence? In order to do that, I need to define what I mean by that. And I want to talk to you about how the early church and how Jesus himself interacted with technology, because there's some fascinating truths and parallels that we can pull from back then and use right now. So, crash course, 90 seconds, 2 minutes or less. What is AI? AI is, or stands for, artificial intelligence. And essentially what it is it's a collection of computer chips put in large warehouses all around the world that are networked together to try and guess what the very next letter and very next word in a sentence is that you will want to know the answer to. And believe it or not, they're word prediction mechanism machines. They call them large language models. And they used to use video game chips, weirdly enough, in order to make these incredible technologies. And whole warehouses are full of millions of chips that create something called a neural network that allows it to, quote unquote, think and respond and reason and answer your questions. And what amazes me is the way they learned how to create artificial intelligence is by studying what? The human brain. The only way they were able to make the breakthroughs necessary, like transistor technology, was studying how you and I think and how our brain works, because truthfully, we barely even know. How many of you have no idea how your brain works? So they studied humanity, and that always reminds me, and this is a truth everywhere, that God's design is always best. Amen? All of artificial technology right now is based upon the natural world that God created, and we are doing our best to mimic it and harness it and direct it. But God was the originator of consciousness and intelligence and creativity, and so we study Him in order to duplicate it. So let's just pause for a minute and remember that God is the great creator. We are all small c creators after Him. So artificial intelligence, believe it or not, is built to function like a human brain. All the nodes and networks together. And so when you ask it questions, it's been trained on all of the data of humanity without asking permission or paying the creators. Everything that has ever been said or written, all the books that have been created, it has learned and studied, and it regurgitates back to you out of the information that it has gleaned. And as someone reminded me this week, it's important to remember, garbage in, garbage out. If you train on good information, you will get good answers, and if you train on bad information, you will get bad answers. I often call AI accumulated intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. I'm rather proud of myself on that one. And here's why. Because it actually isn't artificial in the way that you might imagine. All it is all of humanity's intelligence congregated into one brain together. So in some senses, it's not necessarily artificial. It is the wisdom of humanity throughout the ages collected together in one place and allowing someone's brain the size that we will never imagine, collect it, use it, and answer it. So the simplest answer is that. That's what artificial intelligence is. A warehouse is full of computer chips that act like a human brain that has been trained on all of the information of humanity all at once. Now, This leaves us with many questions as it's been advancing rapidly. In 2022, ChatGPT came out and we were amazed because it could write a poem like Shakespeare. Do you remember? That was amazing. Nobody could do that before. You could tell it what to write and sing a song and it would do it for you lyric-wise. It has come a long way since then. Maybe you've never spent some time with it, but it can write an entire book in one prompt. And it can do a rather decent job of it. It can write articles and essays. It can complete entire papers for college terms and PhDs on a single prompt. It can respond to your friends and family, act as your personal therapist, be your best friend, and even be a romantic partner for you if you so desire. Why in the world you would want that, I have no idea. But people do, and have been, and continue to increasingly so. It can create movies and videos in almost Hollywood quality. You can mimic and deepfake news anchors telling news that didn't happen. And maybe you're like me. How many of you, when you're looking at video on your phone, half the time you're like, is this even real? I have no idea, and I'd like to consider myself relatively intelligent. I stare and I stare, and I have no idea because it is getting so very good at what it does. And if you think you can tell the difference, I would challenge you to go and test that instinct because it is so incredibly convincing. What happens when you can control images and video and technology, we're about to find out as a society and as humanity. But it can do things that humans have never had the ability to do before, and you can do it in a single prompt, a single click for $29.99 a month. So, some of the questions that have arisen recently that we are going to get to in this series as time goes on are questions like this. What happens to the labor market when machines can do what humans do? How many of you have wondered a little bit if your job is safe from AI? Have you talked to a college student lately? They're terrified. My kids often talk about, will there even be jobs by the time we graduate? And will there be? We're about to find out. We don't know. I'd give it 50-50 odds on a massive labor displacement, 50% odds not. I don't know. Some of us are wondering the question, what if we achieve this thing called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, or ASI, Artificial Superintelligence? What happens when that thing might be smarter than your average human? Will it ever turn on us? How many of you are old enough to remember the Terminator? How many of you, when you hear the word Skynet, part of your heart just tightens up a little bit, and you're watching this thing going, I've heard of this before. Is it possible? Well, I don't know. We're about to find out. Anybody who tells you they absolutely know answers to these questions is lying to you or selling you something because we genuinely don't know. This is the cutting edge of new technology. What's it going to do to human society? What happens if it gets trained on bad data? What happens if someone uses it to try and shift elections? We are about to find out the answer to all of those questions and refer back to this message in 2036. And we'll be able to give you perfect answers to much of that. At this point, we genuinely don't know. What we do know is what we have to deal with, and that's what this series is all about. Should we use it? Is it a gift? Is it a danger? That's what we're about to find out. So how do you answer a question like that? Where do we go in the Bible to find out what should we do with artificial intelligence? How many of you can quote me a verse in the Bible that mentions the name AI? None, right? Because Paul never even dreamed of cell phones, let alone artificial intelligence. And so how do we answer a question like that? Well, let's do it this way. Let's go back and ask this question first and then this one second. First question is, how did Jesus use technology? And second question is, how did the early church? So let's start with Jesus. How did Jesus use technology? Jesus lived in what we call a pre-information technology age, or pre-tech age, where they had a few simple but rudimentary technologies. There was no Facebook, there was no social media. They had a very few things that you might not consider technology, but absolutely were. One of them was writing, and the other was money. These were the earliest forms of technology available, writing and money. Writing made it possible for you to contain your ideas in a scroll and let it go further than you and outlive you, so it could communicate ideas without the person being present. Money could communicate value even if you weren't there. You could work 1 year, save that money, and spend it 4 years later, or invest it, or do something else with it. And so let's answer that question. What did Jesus do with writing and money? Interestingly enough, Jesus never wrote a single book or letter or page ever in his life. Did you know that? Is there any record of Jesus writing in the Bible? That's a trick question. Some of you are like, no. The answer is yes. The only thing he ever wrote was something in the sand while the woman was caught in adultery. So whatever Jesus wrote did not live past the next rainstorm. He entrusted the message of the gospel and the good news to the people that he invested his life and his truth in. But Jesus himself never used writing in any material sense, and we have no original copies of anything that he wrote. So by and large, Jesus didn't use writing. What about money? Jesus didn't really use money, or at least he didn't handle it. Who was in charge of the money? Judas. Who should he not have put? No. I mean, anytime Jesus needed money, he said, go talk to Judas. One time he needed to pay a temple tax, and he just had somebody go fishing, pull the fish out, and pull the coin out of his mouth. Jesus did not carry, did not handle money. And so be careful not to draw too much of a conclusion from this. But what do we learn? Jesus generally didn't use technology. Does that mean he was against technology? Absolutely not. We have no indication of that. But here's what it means. Andy Crouch is brilliant here. Here's what it means. To be fully human does not require the use of technology. Isn't that interesting? To be a thriving, faithful, loving, joyful, competent, useful, impactful human being, none has ever been more than Jesus in all of those areas. To be that, you do not need technology. So let's put a pin in that and leave that there. Because I think that's the truth. He did not decry it, he did not insult it, but he did not think it was necessary or essential to human thriving. So then let's ask the second question. Well, what did the early church do with technology? And all of a sudden the picture changes, materially, actually. Because if you study Paul and watch his life, he used technology all of the time. Paul used writing over and over again. And open your Bible, 2/3 of the books of the Bible in the New Testament, he wrote himself. Paul used Roman roads, which were a kind of technology, to travel around the world and spread the gospel. Paul often hopped in a ship to go somewhere new, and sometimes it made it, sometimes it didn't. But Paul used shipping lanes and commerce to get the gospel to new places. And so over and over again, Paul worked for a living as a tent maker. He preached at night and built tents during the day. And that sounds unbelievably exhausting if you ask me, but he was committed to the gospel and at going to the ends of the earth. And so he used technology at his disposal over and over again. The early church was the first to use, put that image back up there for a second. The early church was the very first to do this. This is called a codex. If you want to impress your friends and family this week, you can tell them this. This was the very first kind of, what does it look like? It's a book. Do you know who invented and pioneered the technology of books? It was the early church. Scrolls were really inefficient, and they didn't last very long, and you always had to roll them up and roll them out, and they didn't carry a lot of information. And so they had this idea, well, why don't we sandwich the pages together and bind the binding and put it in this thing called a codex, which we now understand as a book. And the early church were some of the very first, it was the first movement to really leverage this technology. So if you were to ask Paul and Peter and the early church, they would tell you that technology is rather useful if you use it in the right way. What they would also tell you, and this is really, really clear, is that technology was never central to the church. It was never central to what the church did. It was always an addition to. So if they could meet in person, they would meet in person, and if they couldn't meet in person, they would write a letter. Do you understand that? If they could face-to-face, incarnationally get together and share with and pray with and sing with one another, they would. If they could do it face-to-face, they would. But when they couldn't, they would use technology to reach what their words and their bodies could not. So it was never central, but they were not afraid to use it. And then you fast forward to the Middle Ages, and they used the Gutenberg press to print all sorts of Bibles and all sorts of materials and tracts that went all over the place. So you look at church history, and you look at Jesus, and you can learn two things. Number one, like we learned from Jesus, is that technology is not core to thriving as a human being. Understand? But second, technology can be a useful tool if it does not get in the way of the mission. Technology can be a useful tool if it does not get in the way of the very thing that you are trying to create or protect. I would put it this way, if you want to pull a takeaway from it. Technology is a useful tool but should never become a shortcut in the things that matter in life. This is something that you can apply to every light-up device in your pocket, everything that sits on your desk, the car that you drive around in. Maybe it drives you. That's all fine. The question is, in the important things, is your technology a tool that helps you get more out of life or a shortcut that takes away? If you start to answer that question in your own life, it'll be awfully painful and exciting and revealing all at once, but you have to be honest enough to ask it and answer it. If I could put it in an even better, more biblical question and phrase, here's how I would word it, and I'm going to unpack it in the passage right away. Is the way you use technology making you more human or less? Is the way that you use technology, artificial intelligence, the phone in your pocket, is it making you more human, the way that God designed and created and called you to be? Is it making you more human or less? And that's the question that I want to center on in the remaining time together. And here we're going to dive into our text because it speaks to not just what is core to Christianity, it's what is core to being human. The way that God has designed us to thrive and flourish, the instruction manual for humanity. The question is not, can we? The question is, should we? And does it make us more human or less? Let's read together Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 to 40. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets, i.e. all of the Old Testament, everything you read before the book of Matthew, all of the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So how did Jesus get in this situation? Well, he had just embarrassed the Sadducees, and so some people wanted to test him. And so this young buck, this scholar of the law, stands up and he says, Jesus, let's see if you can do this. Can you summarize the whole Old Testament in a sentence or two? And Jesus gives him this brilliant and powerful answer. Could it have been a trap? More than likely. Is it possible he was a little bit serious? Just maybe. But ultimately, he was asking a question that many people asked back then. What is the core of what God wants from me? What is the heart of the Old Testament? What does it really mean to be a follower of Yahweh if I want to remember the important things first and make the main thing the main thing? What is it? And so Jesus answered in this response. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and some passages say with all your strength. And the second, right behind it, is this, love your neighbor as yourself. What you may not realize is that Jesus did not write those words, or at least not personally. These words come from the book of Deuteronomy. These were the most famous words of the Old Testament. They were something called the Shema. Say that with me, Shema. The Shema was the declaration that a Jew would make every morning when they got up. They would talk about it with their kids. They would write it on the doorposts. They would communicate it back and forth, think about it when they went to bed at night. This was the heart and soul of what it meant to be a Jew in the Old Testament. This was called the Shema. And it was love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and mind. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And the second is this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and strength. According to Jesus, this was the heart of what it meant to be a Christian, and this was the heart of what it means to be human. Somehow to be human means to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And also to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you want to summarize everything that Jesus teaches, it comes down to these two things. What does the word love mean? In our culture, it gets diluted so much. For Jesus, it meant delight, desire, something that you lived, something that you chased, something that you obeyed. For Jesus, it wasn't just an emotion or an action. It was both. It was something that you felt and something that you did. It was affection and attention. The word love encompassed all of who you were. So the heart of what it means to be human is to what? Love. There is nothing deeper, nothing more central is to love first God and then the people around you. Love the Lord your God with all of your, and then he starts breaking this thing down. Heart, soul, mind, and in the original Deuteronomy passage and in Mark, they add the word strength. What does it mean to love God with all of your heart? Well, in the Bible, a heart was not this red thing painted on your chest, and when you loved your girlfriend, all of your emotions poured out of your heart. For an ancient Jew, emotion had nothing to do with your heart. It was where your will resided. It was the decisions that you made. Think of it like the throne room of your life. That was your heart. It was the center, the gravitational center of your will. That's what your heart was. And God says the core of humanity is to love him with all of your will and decisions and direction. Next one he says is soul. Soul means body. It means appetites. It means desires. It means the things that you are drawn to in our human existence. Many of the things that you think about that make your personality what it is what the Bible would call your soul. And so we're called to love God with all of our soul, our body, our appetites, and our existence. And then Jesus says we must love God with our mind, your thoughts, the truth that you ingest and that you dwell on, your mental health, the things that you study. We are to love God with all of that. And then in the original and in Mark, the word strength comes in as well. It's like the things that you give yourself to, your schedule, your time, your family. And if you look at this list, what do you realize? This is all of your life. Amen? This is everything. This is actually the point of what Jesus is saying. It's not a compartmentalized portion of your life. It's not a little cubbyhole that you give to God. You are to give God everything that makes you who you are. And you are to love him with all. The key word is all. Now, often when we think about priorities, and I've preached this before, we think about a golf leaderboard. Does anybody like watching golf? You must also like watching paint dry, but that's another discussion. When you're golfing, there's always a leaderboard, and on the leaderboard, one by one, they show who's in the lead and who's behind. And I have used that before as an example of how you prioritize what's in your life. Where does God fit in your family and your job and your hobbies? And that's a good and a beautiful way. The problem is, that doesn't fit very well with what Jesus is talking about here. The image of a leaderboard implies that there are separate sections of your life, but over and over again, these are like concentric circles or a Venn diagram that all converge together. And so the better image than a golf leaderboard that I would use is this. This is what Jesus means when he says love God with all. He does not mean all the separate compartments of your life or to prioritize him above everything else. What he is saying is that just like the center of this wheel, God should be the center of everything in your life. That God should be the center of your family while still loving them wholly. God should be the center of your job while still giving yourself to it. God should be the center of your joys and passions and hobbies. God should be the center of your affections and your emotions and the things that you watch and the thoughts that you think. It's not a matter of integrating things into a golf leaderboard. It's making him the center of everything that you do so that nothing you do is outside of it. It all converges closer and closer together to the center because God is at the core of who you are. This is what it means to love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. It means he is the gravitational center of all those areas of your life. And so, if your heart is what you desire, and your soul is the life that you live, and your mind is what you think about, and your strength is what you give yourself to, then loving God with all of those is what it truly means to be human. And close behind it, Jesus says, is loving your neighbor as yourself. This is what it means to be human. If anyone asks you, this is what it means to be a Christian, this is what it meant to be a Jew, and this is why this is where we need to start. Because the question that we need to start asking is this: does the technology in your hand make you more or less like that? Does your phone or artificial intelligence help you love God with your heart more? Does it let you love God with your mind more? Does it let you love God with your soul more, your strength more? Does it help you become more human or less? If you're willing to answer that question in your own life, it will give you much of what you need to know about whether this technology is good or not for you. Does it help you love your neighbor less? Let's all just be really honest here, no looking anywhere else. Your use of technology right now, does it make you more or less likely to gossip about your neighbor? Your use of technology right now, does it make you more or less likely to be jealous of the people in your life? Does your use of technology right now make you more or less likely to judge people close to you or very far away? Is it getting warm in here? I can't really. Because if I'm being honest, a lot of the way I use technology, the knee-jerk response is it pulls me. But it doesn't pull me to loving God more with my heart, my mind, my soul, and my strength. And it most certainly does not pull me towards loving my neighbor the way I love myself. And all of a sudden, if you're willing to ask that question, you start to see things that you didn't see before. Does it make you more or less human? Let me throw another layer on top of that I have been thinking endlessly about. Do you know what one of the hidden dangers of artificial intelligence is? After having used it and tested it for an article that I was writing, and I will tell you more about that in this series, here's what I learned, and it's going to sound like something that isn't true, but it is. The problem with AI is that it's too easy. It's too easy. It is. In one sentence, I can get an essay. In one sentence, I can write a letter to my wife. Not that I've ever done that, honey. In one sentence, I can write a book. In one sentence, I can create whatever I want. In one sentence, I barely even have to care about what I am asking about. It just spits back accumulated human intelligence from the last 2,000 years. It's too easy. The reason why that's a problem is this, is what really makes us human takes effort. To love God with all of your heart takes effort. To love God with all of your soul takes effort. To love God with all of your mind takes time and study and effort. To love God with all of your strength automatically implies that it takes effort. To love your neighbor as yourself means showing up, not sending an emoticon of praying hands. How often do we do that? Praying for you. We don't even write it, just prayer hands. How long did that take? 18 halves or 1/8 of a second. That was not math. Here's what I have become convinced of, is that effort is the point. What it takes to become truly human inevitably involves friction and time and effort and energy. And in every area that matters, it requires these things. And so if artificial intelligence short-circuits that, then you have short-circuited the very thing that makes you human. The very thing that makes you who God created you to be. You see, the main point is that this life is about formation. That's what the term spiritual formation means. It means you started somewhere in the wrong way, and God is going to make you somewhere in the future in the right way, and it's going to take blood, sweat, tears, and time to get there. And the danger for so many of us is we will go click, 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 click instead. Let me run this through the filter of human experience just to try and drive this home, and then we'll land this plane for this morning. There was a guy on Reddit, the best stories are on Reddit. There was a guy on Reddit who for a year texted his wife, but every single text he sent because ChatGPT created it for him. She was noticing how wonderfully attentive he was that year. It was really nice. He kept saying just the sweetest things. Somewhere along the way, he had gained a little bit larger of a vocabulary, and she was just glad. Maybe he's reading. I don't know. At the end of 12 months, she found out that every single text he sent her, essentially for an entire year, wasn't written by him, was written by ChatGPT, and she was furious. Wouldn't you be? Why? because it wasn't him. And it didn't take any effort at all. Click, click, click. Mel and I have this running joke in our house. We saw this app that was available about a year ago, and it was an app that would automatically text your girlfriend every time throughout the week. You didn't think of her, but it would just shoot a text off, and you could just check to see what you sent. And so it would just check in the morning and say, "Hope you have a great day, honey." Or later in the day, he would say, "Oh, I can't wait to see you tonight," and you didn't even know it was being sent. You'd have to make sure he got up to speed. Our favorite one was, there was this text that it would send, and it would say, "Get ready for the best weekend of your life, honey. It's going to be Cuddle Fest 2026. Now, first off, I would never say that in 1,000 years. I wouldn't even say that with a gun to my head. Let's be honest here. Cuddle Fest 2026? And so in our family, it's this constant joke. Whenever we talk about AI, it's like Cuddle Fest 2026 this weekend. Right? It's not just ridiculous, it's dangerous. Because what is it that makes us human if not our relationships? You're going to farm that out to some computer who doesn't even know who you are or who she is? Do you see what I'm saying? Is your technology making you more human or less? Many kids are using ChatGPT to graduate from university. The most recent statistics say that 60 to 70% of kids, I'm going to say that again, parents take note, 60 to 70% of kids are heavily using AI to get their degrees. Do you know what the problem with that is? You can spend $100,000 and walk out no smarter. Why? Because learning takes effort. Learning takes painful note-taking till your hand cramps up. Learning takes sitting in a room and listening to the person who's talking. Learning takes investment and energy and commitment and energy. I said that. Everything that you need, it takes effort. One kid, when he was graduating from university, if you want just proof of concept, as he was walking across the stage, he had his laptop open, and on the screen was ChatGPT. I don't know if this was a joke or if he was thumbing his nose at the establishment. Here's the other problem. Nobody knows what to do about it, because if they canned every kid who used ChatGPT, they would fail as institutions, so no one can say anything. So now you have kids graduating because they never took the time to learn. Do you know what else takes effort? Character takes effort. Can I get an amen? Parents, when you are teaching your kids something, you can't send them a ChatGPT prompt and hope that it makes them a better person. In our household, routinely, ice cream would go missing. When we were younger, we would buy cases of drumsticks and all the cool stuff, and it would go in the freezer, and lo and behold, 2 days later, 38 had disappeared. And we could not figure out how that was even possible. Even each person eating 5 a day would not even dispense with 38 ice creams in 3 days. Until one day I looked behind the couch and I found 38 wrappers. I'm not going to out which one of my kids who did it, but I bet you can all guess. I said I'm not going to out. Character transformation takes effort, time, energy, consistency, presence, emotion. You cannot farm that out, because that is the very nature of what it takes to be human. Are you catching my drift here? See, the question that you need to be asking is less about which app is better, and even the simplistic question about should I, shouldn't I. The deeper question needs to be this: what does it mean to be human, and is my use of technology helping me towards that or pushing me away from it? And the reality is, if you use it indiscriminately, and there maybe will be ways we talk about how to use it, but if you use it indiscriminately, if you use it as a shortcut instead of a tool, you are giving up the very essence of what it means to be human. And along with that, the joy and the connection that comes with it. If yesterday when Eli and Tekla got married, Eli came out with these beautiful vows that he spoke, and everybody afterwards said, what a brilliant guy. He must love her more than anything. If you found out they were written by ChatGPT, would you still feel that way? No. For all the reasons that we have discussed, because it does not mean anything. Are there uses for it? We will talk about that, but we have to begin here. Here is the great danger. If you want a simple summary, here is my great fear, that human growth is slow and meaningful, and if you're not careful, AI is fast and hollow. If you want a rubric to think through, this is it. Parents, even for yourself, for your kids. Human growth, spiritual growth, becoming more like God wants you to be, is slow and meaningful, painfully slow sometimes, amen? Longer than you would expect, not even days or weeks, but months or years, but that is what it means to grow. Human growth and spiritual growth is often slow and meaningful. AI, if you are not careful, or if you use it indiscriminately, is fast and shallow. Spiritual practices are proof of concept. There are times that using the shortcut and you think you are helping is actually hurting. I'll show you a short video here that will leave us with something to land on. Years ago when the kids were younger, we were homeschool parents, and so we were always looking for cool stuff to do with our kids. We were out at a friend's farm, and we saw all these chrysalises on the milkweed that was standing up. You can just pause it there. We saw these chrysalises, and we decided we were going to make a family experiment of it, so we put it inside of a glass jar, we poked holes in the top, and we took it home. We researched all about it, and this is how you raise a monarch butterfly, is you give it time to come out of its shell. And nothing happened day after day, nothing happened. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 6 days, 7 days, but all of a sudden, right around day 10, have any of you done this before? All of a sudden, that chrysalis starts to just shake and move just a little bit. And then it starts to split down the middle, and you start to see emerging from it this slimy version of that. It just kind of like snakes its way and slithers its way out from its journey from a caterpillar into a beautiful monarch butterfly. Can I tell you, every one of my kids, what did they want to do while this was happening? Do you know what they wanted to do? They wanted to help. It's like helping in the kitchen. It's not helping. They wanted to help. They wanted to maybe pull off that chrysalis so that it could get out a little easier. And then when it was hanging there upside down and swaying and almost vibrating as it was trying to work those wings out, they wanted to help by spreading its wings. And we had to stop them over and over and over again and tell them, listen, no. If you help it, you're actually going to hurt it because it needs to struggle in order to become what it is supposed to be. And so that vibrating that it's doing is not it wrestling, it's pushing the fluid from its core into its wings so that it can fly. And that testing of its arms and wings is not just practice, it's extending the muscles they're going to need to get away from danger. Listen, the actual process of struggling and effort is what makes it able to thrive in the future. And this is how we must treat technology. In some things, it's beautiful and wonderful and useful. But if you're not careful in the things that matter, you will use it as a shortcut instead of a tool. If you're not careful, it will get rid of the effort necessary to form you into the person that God is making you into. If you're not careful, it will make you less human, not more. So be willing to pause, sit with your wife or your husband, your boyfriend, your parents, whoever you're with this week. Sit down and just ask this question, real simple. The way I use AI, the way I use tech, is it making me more or less human? The way I use artificial intelligence, the way I interact with my phone, am I using it in the things that matter as a tool to do more or a shortcut to do less? More important than any of these questions is Jesus' words. Is this technology helping me to love God with all of my heart, all of my soul, all of my mind, and all of my strength? Does it help me love my neighbor as myself? We will get to all the hot button issues, we will, but we must start here because every one of them comes back to this. And if we are going to be faithful, in the days ahead, we must make a wise choice in how we use the tools in front of us. Why don't you stand with me? I'll invite the worship team back up.